The Greek philosopher Aristotle once wrote that the single most common denominator of mankind is the desire to be happy, however happiness may be defined by the individual. In his work, Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle wrote that the primary concern of philosophy was to answer the question, how shall we live in order to be happy? Virtually every action that you take in life is aimed at somehow achieving your own happiness, or moving away from the people and circumstances that cause you to feel unhappy. Sigmund Freud called this the pleasure principle, and for him and for many psychologists and psychoanalysts, it became the foundation for studying the mental and emotional aspects of human behavior. It's safe to say that virtually everything you think or say or do is simply a means, the end of which is the achievement of your own happiness. The question of happiness, how to achieve more of it, and how to avoid unhappiness has been studied exhaustively for hundreds of years. In this session, we'll talk about some of the laws that have been discovered in the universal search for happiness. You can then use these laws and principles to dramatically increase the level of happiness that you enjoy in virtually everything you do. As I mentioned earlier, the starting point of your achieving happiness is for you to decide exactly how you define the word happiness. As Stephen Covey writes, you must start with the end in mind. Begin with a goal and work back. You need to engage in the hard, disciplined thinking of deciding for yourself exactly what combination of ingredients causes you to feel the happiest about yourself most of the time. Remember, you are both unique and extraordinary. There's never been and never will be anyone exactly like you. You have a remarkable combination of tastes and values and beliefs and needs and desires that make your particular definition of happiness different from that of anyone else who has ever lived. And only you can decide for yourself what makes you happy. No one can ever dictate happiness to another person. It's a purely subjective or personal decision. When I think of how different happiness is to each person, I think of a large smorgasbord. Have you ever been to a long buffet line with 20 or 30 or even 40 different dishes of all kinds? If you ever want to see a living example of the differences between human beings, just stand for a short while at the exit end of a buffet line and look at the different combinations of foods that the individuals have put on their plates. You'll never see two exactly the same. The sizes, colors, proportions, and mixtures will be different for each person. This simple exercise is proof that neither you nor anyone else can ever decide what will make another person happy. For each person, this choice is his or her primary responsibility in life, and it's both mandatory and unavoidable. A useful and enjoyable exercise for you is to write down on a piece of paper the following line: I would be perfectly happy if. Then complete the sentence with as many different answers as you can think of. You might say, I would be perfectly happy if I had all the money I needed, if I enjoyed perfect health, if I had the love, respect, and esteem of all the people who are important to me, if I were living in the perfect climate, or if I was doing the perfect job, and so on. The more detailed your answers are, and the more you break your answers down into clear definitions of exactly what those answers mean, the easier it will be for you to organize your life in such a way that you enjoy far more happiness than the average person. The silliest thing about the concept of happiness is that, although everybody wants more of it, very few people have ever taken any time at all to decide for themselves what it really means to them. This is probably why most people are dissatisfied with much of their lives. Fortunately, you can free yourself from this tendency by clarifying for yourself exactly how each part of your life would be if you were a perfectly happy person already. In psychology, and as you will see in economics, the basic principle of human behavior is that all human action is motivated by a dissatisfaction of some kind. If a person was perfectly satisfied, he would have no urge or desire to do or change anything. So the starting point of achieving greater happiness for you can be an evaluation of some of the needs that you might experience which lead to dissatisfaction. Perhaps the most important work in this area was done by the psychologist Abraham Maslow when he postulated his hierarchy of needs. What he said was that each person has a series of needs from the lowest to the highest, and that each person acts continuously to satisfy these needs. Maslow explained that until a lower order need was satisfied, the individual couldn't think or turn his mind to a higher order need. He also demonstrated that once a need has been satisfied, it's no longer a motivator. Once you get something you want and you have enough of it, you're no longer motivated or driven to get it. Your motivation then changes toward getting something that you still feel a need for. Let me explain. Maslow's hierarchy originally had 5 needs or levels. In his later research, he suggested that there were 2 even higher needs. The lowest need, and the first need that must be satisfied, is the need for survival. Until a person's survival needs are satisfied, until he or she is no longer concerned for the basics of life, food, clothing, shelter, that person is not concerned about higher needs. Maslow also demonstrated that a person who, through accident or circumstance, was deprived of a lower need, like food, he would stop trying to fulfill any higher need until the lower need was satisfied once more. The second need up on Maslow's hierarchy is the need for security of all kinds, physical, emotional, financial, and so on. This is the foundation of the life insurance industry. Once a person is assured of survival, he or she becomes concerned with security. Once the need for security has been met, the individual then turns to the third level of need, which is the need for love and belonging, the need to be accepted by other human beings. People need to interact and associate with other people, to feel themselves to be part of a social group, to be known and cared for by others. This is why solitary confinement is the worst punishment that can be given to the worst criminal in the worst maximum security institution. Being deprived of the company of others is very painful emotionally. The fourth level of need discussed by Maslow is the need for self-esteem. This is the need to like yourself and respect yourself and feel that you're respected and appreciated by others. The fifth level of need on Maslow's hierarchy is the need for self-actualization. This is defined as the feeling that you are becoming everything you're capable of becoming. Maslow felt that the most advanced and fully mature members of our society were those who were functioning at the higher levels of need satisfaction. Self-actualization can be seen when people engage in activities that challenge their abilities and stretch them toward the greater realizations of their full potential. The 2 higher needs that Maslow added later were the need for beauty and the need for truth, in that order. Once a person has satisfied his or her needs for survival, security, belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization, he or she would naturally turn to beauty, as in music or art, and truth, as in philosophy or religion. However, if a person who is functioning at the higher levels of the hierarchy of needs suddenly fell off a moving boat in the middle of the night and was threatened with drowning, he or she would immediately forget about the satisfaction of all higher needs and would revert instantly to a total concern with survival, the most basic of human needs. As you mature and grow and become a more fully functioning human being, you find that you're motivated at a higher and higher level of need. The kinds of dissatisfactions that you experience, which deprive you of the happiness that you desire, are triggered by dissatisfaction at higher and higher levels. One of the wonderful things about Western society is that, because of our relative level of affluence, more and more people have been freed from a preoccupation with satisfying lower-level needs and given the opportunity to devote more of their time and thoughts to the satisfaction of higher-level needs. The lower-level needs, those of survival and security and belonging, are all what might be called deficiency needs. The fulfilling of these needs doesn't necessarily make you happy, but being deprived of these needs can make you very unhappy indeed. The higher-level needs, the needs for self-esteem, for self-actualization, for beauty and truth, are all what are called being needs. These are needs the fulfillment of which can make you happier and can lead you to the feelings of elation, joy, and peak experiences where you feel absolutely wonderful about yourself and life in every respect. This, of course, is one of the highest states of happiness. In achieving your own happiness, another helpful way of defining what happiness means to you is something that I teach in my seminars. I say that everything that you could possibly want in life could be listed under one of 7 categories. You always have a tendency to measure how well you're doing in life and how happy you are by how much of each of these 7 ingredients you have or have not managed to achieve. The first overall ingredient of happiness is peace of mind. You are happy to the degree to which you can achieve your own peace of mind. The interesting thing about inner peace is that it's the normal, natural state of man, and that it is deviations from inner peace and happiness that are unnatural and abnormal. It's important to point this out because many people think that the experience of inner joy is unusual and accidental. Others, very few, realize that this inner experience is the norm, and they strive to organize their lives so that they have it more often. The second ingredient of happiness is health and energy. Your health, which is largely reflected in your levels of energy, is the absolute minimum requirement for the assurance of your survival and well-being. You know that if you gain everything else but you lose your health, you're failing in the most important area. But if you achieve and maintain high levels of health and energy, no matter what else happens to you on the outside, you're still doing pretty well as a human being. The third ingredient of happiness is loving relationships. You are happy and successful to the degree that other people love and respect you, and you love and respect other people. Most of your happiness in life will come from your interactions with those people that you care about and who care about you. So developing and preserving loving relationships with other people is a measure of everything you are as a human being. The fourth ingredient of happiness is financial freedom. Most people want a lot of money primarily because they feel that with a lot of money, they'll be free to live their lives the way they want. And they feel that this will make them happy. Most material objects and accomplishments are seen as a means to achieve this end. The big mistake that many people make is that they confuse means and ends, and they become totally obsessed with getting and spending, and they lose sight of the reasons for wanting money in the first place. Financial freedom can be defined simply as having enough money so that you don't worry about it or think about it, so that you can then turn your mind and emotions to other, more important subjects. Money is a little bit like a deficiency need in that if you have enough of it, you seldom think about it. But if you have too little for any period of time, you think of almost nothing else. The fifth ingredient of happiness is worthy goals and ideals. In reality, happiness is a condition that you experience when you're fully engaged in doing something that is important and meaningful to you. This is why Viktor Frankl wrote that a need for meaning and purpose is the deepest craving in human nature. It's only when you feel that your life stands for something bigger than yourself and that what you're doing is making a difference in the world that you're truly happy. The sixth ingredient of happiness is self-knowledge and self-understanding. The ancient Greeks had a saying engraved in stone above the temple of Apollo at Delphi which said, "Man, know thyself." This advice is more than 2,000 years old, and it's equally true today. You can only be happy when you fully understand why it is you feel the way you feel and do the things you do. Self-knowledge and self-understanding seem to go hand in hand with inner peace, tranquility, and happiness. The seventh overall ingredient of happiness is a sense of self-fulfillment. It's the feeling you have when you're living your life completely and leaving nothing out. Henry David Thoreau, when he withdrew to Walden Pond for 2 years to think about life, wrote that his primary motivation was to live deliberately and not to come to the end of my years without ever having really lived. Self-fulfillment is another word for self-actualization. This is the need being satisfied by those men and women who have the healthiest personalities and who are the most fully integrated members of our society. Now you have to ask yourself, in which of these areas might you be suffering a deficiency? In which of these areas are you currently dissatisfied or unhappy for any reason? Here's a helpful exercise that you can give to yourself on a regular basis. Take a clean sheet of paper and, giving yourself only 30 seconds to reply, ask yourself this question. What are my 3 most important goals in life right now? Write down the answers quickly without thought or evaluation. Then, ask yourself the second question. What are my 3 biggest worries or problems in life right now? And write them down quickly as well. The answers to these questions will reveal 2 remarkable things. First, they'll indicate to you clearly what you need to do more of or have more of in order to be happy. And second, they'll show you what you need to eliminate in order to get rid of any unhappiness or dissatisfaction that currently exists in your life. Your subconscious mind is remarkable in this way. If you only give yourself 30 seconds to write down the answers to these questions, your subconscious will sort through all the millions of bits of data stored in your mental computer and pop the correct answers to the surface of your mind and onto the piece of paper as accurately as if you had taken 30 minutes or even 3 hours to perform the same exercise. Try it for yourself and see. Now, in addition to the laws of success and achievement we discussed earlier, there are 8 specific laws you can practice to achieve the happiness you both desire and deserve. The first law is the law of integrity. This law says that happiness arises as a byproduct of your choosing to live your life consistent with your highest values and aspirations. Just as Maslow's highest need is truth, your highest need and the foundation of your happiness is living in truth with yourself and with everything and everyone around you. The slightest deviation from truth, the slightest tendency to compromise with what you know to be right, will detract from your happiness almost immediately. You are designed with an inner guide or conscience that always tells you the right thing to do, and you're only happy when you live your life completely consistent with it. To be happy, your goals and your values must be congruent. They must fit into each other like a hand into a glove. Virtually all stress and unhappiness comes from trying to do one thing when you believe something else is more important and more correct. For example, most people believe that their relationships, their spouses, their children, their families are more important to them than anything else. However, they sometimes become confused and begin to spend an inordinate amount of time achieving material success in their careers, thereby ignoring their relationships. And the harder they work at their jobs, the more dissatisfied and unhappy they become, even when they're financially successful, because deep down inside they know that what is truly valuable to them is the people in their lives, not the money. It's only when you have the courage to insist upon living your life in complete harmony with your highest values that happiness arises and emerges spontaneously like sunrise, bringing you the peace and contentment you really want. The first part of the law of integrity says that when you set goals and ideals that are worthy of you and strive to achieve them, you'll experience happiness and satisfaction. As Shakespeare said in the play Hamlet, "To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man." The second part of the law of integrity says that whenever you choose to live consistent with the very best that is in you, you'll automatically experience happiness and joy. You've probably had an experience in life where you've decided to walk away from a bad situation, even though it might have been costly either emotionally or financially, but you did it because it was the right thing to do. You acted on a higher principle. You behaved in a manner consistent with your highest values. You'll also recall that having decided to do so and having done it, you felt absolutely wonderful about yourself and your life. You felt a tremendous experience of elation and joy. And the most remarkable thing was that everything turned out all right in the end. All of the negative consequences that you were afraid might occur never materialized. Perhaps the finest example of living in truth and the most important demonstration of your integrity or honesty is with regard to peace of mind. It's only when you set peace of mind as your highest goal and you refuse to stay in any situation that detracts from your peace of mind that you'll find yourself enjoying the highest and finest form of happiness. The law of integrity is another way of saying that you are given peace of mind to serve you as an inner barometer. It'll tell you what is right for you and what is wrong. If you listen to your intuition and only do and say what gives you a sense of inner peace and harmony, you'll probably never make another mistake. In fact, Catherine Ponder writes in her book, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity, that men and women begin to become great only when they begin to take time by themselves to listen to their inner voices and organize their lives in such a way that their activities and relationships give them a deep sense of inner peace. The first step that you can take to personal greatness is to sit down quietly and look over your life to determine the areas where you're not experiencing the peace of mind and happiness that you really want. You'll find that this is a very easy exercise to do because your mind is continually preoccupied with these problems, just like a person sitting on a tack would be preoccupied with the pain. Your job is to get off the tack. Your responsibility to yourself is to realize that you can never make someone else happy by being unhappy yourself, just as you can never make someone else healthy by being sick. You should not sacrifice your happiness in an attempt to somehow achieve the happiness of another person. You'll only end up making no one happy, especially yourself. In the play Cyrano de Bergerac by Edmond Rostand, Cyrano, the great individualist, is asked why it is that he is so outspoken and so self-assertive. He answers with this beautiful line. He says, "I choose the line of least resistance in this, that I will please at least myself in all things." When you make the decision that, for better or worse, you will please at least yourself in all things, only then will you be truly happy. And only then, it seems, will you be able to help anyone else to be happy as well. The second law of happiness is the law of emotion. It says that human beings are 100% emotional in everything they think and feel and decide. I used to think that people were 90% emotional and 10% logical. However, both research and experience contradicts this conclusion. People are totally emotional in everything they do. If a person says to you that he's decided to do the logical thing, it simply means that he has more emotion devoted to that course of action than he does to another course of action, and he uses the word logical to justify his decision. Someone once said that no matter how old you become, you always have the emotions of a teenager. This may or may not be true, but the central impact of your emotions and feelings is a key component in both understanding and achieving your own happiness. The first part of the law of emotion is that you are motivated by two major groups of emotions, those of love or desire and those of fear or loss. These are the positive emotions and the negative emotions. These emotions were described by Sigmund Freud as emotions associated with pleasure and emotions associated with pain. You have a tendency to move toward those experiences you associate with pleasure or happiness, and you have a tendency to move away from those experiences you associate with pain or unhappiness. This is the essence of the pleasure principle that I mentioned earlier. The second part of this law of emotion says that the content of your emotional life is largely determined by the thoughts you dwell upon most of the time. This is such a simple and obvious truth that it's often overlooked by most people. It simply says that if you think happy thoughts, you will be a happy person. If you think angry thoughts, you'll be an angry person. If you think about the things that people have done to hurt you and the reasons you have to be angry or unhappy, you'll be negative, pessimistic, and eventually you'll be depressed. Abraham Lincoln once wrote, "A man is just about as happy as he makes up his mind to be." Well, this is true for you and true for me. The third part of the law of emotion says, if you deliberately choose to think positive, loving, uplifting thoughts, you can create and maintain your own happiness in spite of what is happening around you. No one can make you feel anything. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. You decide to feel happy, and you decide to feel unhappy by the thoughts that you choose to dwell upon most of the time. Therefore, the smartest thing for you or anyone else to do is to choose to dwell upon the kind of thoughts that uplift and enrich your life. The third law in this session is the basic law of happiness, which says the quality of your life is largely determined by how you feel at any given moment. Because you're 100% emotional in every respect, It is how you feel that determines your levels of energy, your personality, your attitude, your levels of performance and output, the clarity of your thinking, the quality of your relationships, and your level of happiness. Truly successful people are those who enjoy every part of the journey at least as much, if not more so, than they anticipate enjoying the destination. Earl Nightingale once wrote that happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Happiness comes from working step by step toward the accomplishment of something that's important to you. It's the process more than the end result that constitutes happiness, because happiness is experienced in the now rather than at some future date. The first part of this law of happiness is that how you feel, the quality of your emotional life, is largely determined by how you talk to yourself. Your self-talk, your inner dialogue, what you say to yourself on a regular basis, largely determines the tone of your emotional life. And the wonderful thing about your self-talk is that it's completely under your own control. One of the best bits of advice I ever read was, when something goes wrong, say something right. Immediately override a negative experience by saying something positive and cheerful. Control your own self-talk. This brings us to the second part of the law of happiness, which says that the way you interpret events to yourself determines your emotional responses to those events. This is another way of saying that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to what happens to you that determines how you feel about it. If you interpret an external event as being positive or helpful, you'll remain optimistic and cheerful. If you interpret the same event as being negative or hurtful, you'll become angry and frustrated. You'll make yourself unhappy. And the choice is always yours. The third part of this law says that the fastest way to take control of your emotions is to look for the good in any situation you're facing. Now, this requires tremendous strength of will, especially when things are going wrong all around you and people are blaming you for their problems. However, if you look for the good, even if you just seek out the valuable lesson in each experience, you'll always find it. And you can't be looking for the good or the valuable lessons that the experience holds for you and be negative or unhappy at the same time. Remember, your subconscious mind can only hold one thought at a time, either positive or negative. And if you deliberately choose to hold positive thoughts and dwell upon those thoughts, then the negative thoughts simply can't get in. This brings us naturally to the fourth law of happiness, which is called the law of substitution. It says that you can keep yourself positive by substituting a positive thought for a negative thought. The law of substitution is often called the crowding out principle. It simply says that you can crowd out of your mind any thoughts that aren't helpful to you by simply choosing to focus your attention on a thought that is more helpful or more positive. Many people are negative for the simple reason that they have not deliberately chosen to be positive. They have not systematically planted in their minds the thoughts that are consistent with the emotions they desire to experience. Dr. Martin Seligman of the University of Pennsylvania, in his recent book Learned Optimism, talks about his 25 years of research in cognitive psychology. He says that the great majority of people, the pessimists, have developed what he calls learned helplessness. He says that if a person has a series of experiences or makes a series of attempts to do something and is not successful, that person unconsciously assumes that there's nothing that he can do to change things. He perceives himself to be helpless. From that point onward, even when he's given an opportunity of some kind, he will turn it down and give you every conceivable reason why it's not possible for him. He's tried and failed in the past, and so he's now learned to be helpless. An illustration of this is the Indian elephant, a huge beast that weighs as much as 5 tons. Indian elephants are domesticated very early in life and trained to be docile and easily controlled by their owners. The way they do it is simple. When the elephant is a baby, its owner chains it with a large chain to a large stake driven deeply into the ground. The elephant struggles against the chain for hour after hour. Finally, the baby elephant gives up and accepts that when it's chained to a stake, it's helpless. It does no good to struggle. It might just as well stand there until its master comes back and takes off the chain. For the rest of the elephant's life, all its owner has to do is to tie a small rope around the elephant's leg and attach the rope to a small stake in the ground in order to hold the elephant firmly. The elephant, as soon as it feels the rope and the stake, stops struggling. Even though the rope is small and the stake is shallow, the elephant has learned to be helpless. The elephant no longer struggles or strains against the leash. The elephant may have the strength and the power to knock down houses, but it's completely docile and easily controlled because of its attitude. The elephant's earlier experiences of futility have convinced it that it's powerless whenever it's tied to a stake, no matter how small the stake may be. Now, many people are like that elephant because they allow themselves to think continually of the reasons why not, rather than the reasons why. It seems that as soon as you begin to concentrate on how you can achieve a goal, rather than whether or not it's achievable, your mind automatically becomes positive and all your energies become channeled toward achievement and happiness rather than toward failure and frustration. The fifth law of happiness is the law of expression, which states that whatever is expressed is impressed, and whatever is impressed is expressed. Whatever you say, either to yourself or out loud, is impressed into your subconscious mind. And whatever is impressed into your subconscious mind will ultimately be expressed in your thoughts, your feelings, your conversation, and your actions. The more emotion that you use to express any thought or idea, the more deeply it will be impressed into your subconscious mind, and the more rapidly it will be re-expressed in your life. Whatever you say with conviction triggers thoughts, ideas, and actions consistent with those words, so be sure to pick your words carefully. When you think of a challenge or a goal, and you repeat to yourself the words, "I can do it, I can do it, I can do it," you trigger all kinds of feelings and actions that propel you forward toward doing the things that will enable you to achieve the goal. The sixth law of happiness is the law of reversibility. It states that just as your feelings determine your actions also determine your feelings. This is a remarkable and powerful law that says that even if you don't feel a particular way, such as self-confident or happy, if you act as if or pretend that you have the feelings already, the actions themselves will have a backflow effect and generate the emotions consistent with them. When you act in a certain way, the actions themselves trigger thoughts, images, feelings, and attitudes that are consistent with those actions. You can, in effect, control much of the content of your mental and emotional life simply by moving your body in such a way that it's consistent with the way in which you wish to think and feel. The seventh law of happiness is the law of visualization, which states that ideas and images tend to awaken emotions and feelings that correspond to them. When you create clear mental pictures of yourself as happy, positive, and optimistic, these mental pictures will trigger feelings and actions that actually lead to your being happy, positive, and optimistic. One of the most helpful exercises that you can engage in is to think of a time in your life when you've been extremely happy, and to replay that experience on the screen of your mind, as though you were running a movie projector. Put yourself right into the picture and re-experience or get the feelings that go with it. You can actually make yourself happy by dwelling upon previous experiences when you've been happy. The eighth law of happiness is the law of practice. This law states that whatever you practice and repeat often enough becomes a new habit. Just as you learn to drive a car or type on a typewriter or ride a bicycle, you can train yourself to be a predominantly happy and optimistic person by walking, talking, and acting as though you were happy already. You begin to become happy when you decide for yourself the combination of ingredients in your life that will make you happy and then start to move toward them. Simultaneously, you need to determine the things in your life that are depriving you of happiness and begin to remove them. Happiness is an active state or condition that you experience when you're becoming everything that you're capable of becoming, and you're moving toward the realization of your full potential. It's only when you're doing something that's important to you, something that causes you to strive and stretch towards your limits, that you experience joy and satisfaction. Underlying it all is the law of correspondence, which says that you will be happy on the outside to the degree to which you are happy on the inside. The more true you are to yourself and the more consistently you live in harmony with your highest values and aspirations, the happier a person you will be.